And at 10, Reputation. The Reputation mod is one of my favorite Skyrim mods because honestly it makes the game feel just that much more like an actual RPG. In the base game, no matter what you do, everyone will view you in the same way unless you actually do something for them specifically. Nothing actually changes depending on the choices you make or even the crimes that you commit. You could have slaughtered everyone in Solitude, but when you enter Whiterun, they just act like nothing happened. Well, this mod changes that. With the Reputation mod, everything that you do in the game will either make you more famous or more infamous. From certain quest lines to even how many bandits you've killed, everything you do will either make you more of a good guy or a bad guy. But no matter what way you go, there will be different effects, from even Nazim no longer disrespecting you to being charged more at shops. The Reputation mod is such a subtle change that adds a huge amount to the game. It's great. You can even configure what actually inputs data and how much certain things affect your stats. You can even have the mod ignore the Dark Brotherhood questline, among others, which is recommended by me personally because how would anyone know that you're a member of the Dark Brotherhood unless you walk around in the armor? And you can also choose how fast you become associated with law, crime, Adric devotion, Daedric taint. It's incredible and I highly recommend this for role-playing purposes, okay? And if you like Skyrim mods, or just want me to talk more about what I'm passionate about, be sure you give this video a thumbs up and subscribe so I know, okay? I love this game so much and I'm so happy that I can talk about it. I literally have one tattoo only and it's a Skyrim one. I'd show you, but it's under the shirt, okay? And I'm wearing a Talos amulet. If I could do this more, that would be amazing for my mental health, so please justify it. In at 9, textures. The textures for Skyrim are very outdated, not really having been improved since its original release in 2011. But of course, there are mods for that. And this number isn't just about one specific mod, but rather multiple that keep true to vanilla while also ensuring that you aren't seeing pixels unless you squint. First up, obviously, is SMIM, aka the Static Mesh Improvement mod. Basically, it makes what would normally be a flat texture three-dimensional. The most noticeable changes for myself are the various ropes, chests, and barrels. The ropes on the various walls and structures, along with the ones on the barrels, can now actually be seen as ropes instead of just tape with a rope design on it, and the chests finally look better than Minecraft's. While that is just a base and essential mod, you should also consider getting the Noble Skyrim's 2K textures with the SMIM patch, since this will make more of the game's textures feel like you're in another world instead of just actually in a game. And what Noble Skyrim misses, a Midian-born Book of Silence will cover, those things being the various armors in the game only. But still, keeping the look of the original armors but multiplying the texture quality exponentially. And then there's the NPCs as well. You can choose whatever you want. For this case, I personally use UMP and then Better Males for my NPCs, since they're only 2 mods, but they cover everyone, unlike the Bidgen NPCs sets. But if you have other favorites like CBBE or the Windsong character overhaul, feel free to use those as well, and any other texture mods, okay? You don't need to use these ones specifically, but you need some in general if you want Skyrim to feel more like a 2022 game. And at 8, Legacy of the Dragonborn. Legacy of the Dragonborn is one of the coolest Skyrim mods, and honestly for me, it's something that's not only cool but incredibly useful. With my brain never really wanting to remember literally anything, it's a place where I can not only store but also display all of my achievements in one given playthrough, and something that I have not yet completed 100% for obvious reasons. This mod adds a new location to Solitude called the Dragonborn Gallery, which is essentially a museum for your character, requiring you to collect all the items the curator wants to display. And if you want to use the items that you need to display, you can actually, if you have the right materials, make a replica of them, allowing for it to be on display, but also the good one in your inventory. Basically, this mod acts as a giant storage room with cool displays, a passive income through NPC donations, and adds a couple of cool new items to boot, and serves as a reminder of maybe a couple of items you haven't collected yet and the ones that you've already found. Plus, the replica items mean that you can have the fake ones at the museum and then the real ones in a separate room in your house if that's how you want to do it. And at 7, Immersive Speechcraft. Immersive Speechcraft is also an incredible roleplay mod, much like a Reputation. However, this time around, instead of making you more famous or infamous, this mod enables far more interactions with NPCs, some based on your speech skill level and relationship with said said NPC. For example, you can ask them to follow you, the distance of which will be determined by your speech skill. You can barter with any NPC, you can command them like a follower, you can gift them an item, you can beg for gold, you can trick them, causing them to tie their shoe, you can instigate a fight, or you can make them strip because there was a bee in their clothes. For those options though, you can't really be wearing a helmet or something that covers your face, because you know it's rude. Or if you have your weapon drawn, you can actually mug NPCs, and if you're in combat, you can ask nearby NPCs for help, or you can just tell them to run and save themselves. The likelihood of these working is reliant on your speech skill, but I do believe that using these options successfully will also help increase that skill. So no longer will you need to just spend ages bartering with shopkeepers to level up your speech, and it allows for more roleplay opportunities for jokesters or thief characters, as well as allowing you to kill Nazim in the middle of Whiterun by calling his mother a horker. And at 6, encounters. Skyrim's random world encounters help make the province feel more alive and lived in, but there are only so many locations that you can encounter these events, and only so many of the actual events themselves, meaning that by the time you complete the main questline and start on the DLCs, you may have even seen the same one multiple times. There are multiple mods that aim to fix this, and those are some that I'm suggesting to you. Firstly, I suggest you get the mod that enables the vampire attacks against cities again, since that's a little more interesting than just chilling in Whiterun normally. And there's also the been too long since we had a good bandit raid mod, which allows bandits to actually attack Whiterun like the guards say happened regularly, but seemingly doesn't once you show up. But also some more general encounter mods, like the immersive world encounters, which is, from my understanding, the most popular one. It adds 100 random new events, 2 of which turn into full-on quests. There's also the extended encounters mod, which allows you to actually see NPCs out in the wild doing their thing depending on the progress quests that you've made so far with like the factions and whatnot. And there's also Dragonstone encounters, a mod that adds some extra region-specific encounters for you to find, and also enables like encounters after you've fast traveled, like, oh, someone was following you. There's also immersive patrols, which works well for those who enjoy seeing prisoners being escorted, or maybe a group of Dawn Guard on watch. And I don't know, these make Skyrim feel more like the great province that it's supposed to be, instead of what just at times feels like a barren wasteland, because that's immersion breaking. Halfway through, and at number 5, more nodes. The mod itself, I don't think is actually called more nodes, but what it's probably called isn't going to be allowed on YouTube. So yeah, I'll just call it more nodes for now, and if you want to look it up later, you can. Basically, this mod edits certain Skyrim body mods like UNP and adds more areas to the body that physics can be applied. Basically, it turns compatible female body mods into jiggle physics emulators. So I think you can see where I'm going with this one, alright? HDT physics is nothing new with Skyrim mods, especially in this area. However, where I think that this mod in particular really stands out over the other jiggle mods that you can get is that this one's VR compatible. And I don't mean that like it won't crash your game when you boot it up. I'm saying that these nodes that it adds are capable of being interacted with using your VR character's hands. So yeah, you can just start walking around slapping characters' butts. You can commit even more crimes now in game. You can start assaulting people with more than just bloody knuckles. So yeah, I'm sure you can understand why this mod would put a strain on your love life. And no, ironically enough, this isn't the one that ruined mine. In at 4, reputation. Now, this doesn't do things like adding nodes or allowing you to have biological children. However, the Skyrim reputation mod definitely is going to give you more reasons to keep on playing. With the reputation mod installed, everything you do in-game will either make you more famous or more infamous. From quest lines to even how many bandits you kill, everything you do will make you either more of a good guy or a bad guy. But no matter which way you go, there will be different effects. From even Nazim no longer disrespecting you to being charged more at shops, the reputation mod is such a subtle change that adds a huge amount to your game. This mod made me replay Skyrim so many times by myself, like, oh my god. I mean, like, I spent a load of time trying to fix my reputation after the Dark Brotherhood questline because I accidentally left it enabled for changing my score in the mod menu. You can turn certain things off. But after defeating Alduin, you're actually recognized as the Dragonborn and the savior of Skyrim, which is something that the main game was very much lacking. Alright, you saved them after, but then nobody cared. because it's like they never thought that they were in danger. They're like, ah, no, he wasn't gonna eat the world anyway. Who cares, dude? Like, come on. This mod also fixes that, okay? And it lets you become famous. And I mean, who doesn't want that? At least in Skyrim. Getting close to the end, in at number 3, Bijan NPCs. Bijan NPCs is probably the funniest name for a mod that I've ever seen. Well, at least out of the mods on the Nexus. This mod, I believe, is actually potentially a collection of mods under the Bijan NPCs umbrella. From the ones that I can remember, we have Bijan Wives and Bijan War Maidens, although those also may be separate mods with NPCs being its own. These mods modify certain NPCs though to look better, and it kind of removes the whole grunge and grime from their appearance. The NPCs edition of the mod focuses on Vex, Sapphire, Irileth, Rick, Hulda, Lisette, Carlotta, Carlia, Tanalia, Adrian, Maven, Ignan, Girder, and Ygritte, while the other sections focus on, well, their certain category. The War Maidens and the marryable NPCs. However, I think that just the fact that I was unable to view this mod page without being logged in, since it couldn't prove that I was over 18, gives you an idea about how this mod changes your game. It's not something as extreme as like a Lover's Lab mod, but it's definitely certainly making your significant other worrying about your next night together. Especially if you've specifically downloaded the Bijan Wives version, because like, you know. Penultimately, in at number 2, CBBE. CBBE is one of, if not the most popular Skyrim mod of all time. Okay, well technically I think that SkyUI is the most popular mod, or maybe the unofficial patch, but those are more of fixes than mods in my eyes. Anyway, for those of you who don't know somehow, CBBE is actually an acronym standing for Caliente's Beautiful Bodies Edition, and it's a mod aimed at, well, I'm sure you can figure that out. Its main focus is adding bigger butts and boobs to female NPCs, which I'm sure you can understand why it's such a popular mod now. At this point, Skyrim is nothing more than one of those like you can't last 5 minutes playing this game ads, but actually real. Nevertheless, downloading this will ruin your love life in multiple ways. Firstly, okay, it could warp your perception of reality and then change your standards to be ridiculously high, as if society hasn't set those high enough as it is. Or 2, it will also make your significant other question why you have these mods to begin with. And it works in every way, okay? Whether you're dating a male, a woman, a non-binary person, or otherwise identifying, they'll all have questions as to why you have this mod, okay? Like what? Is my body not good enough? Why are you installing that if you're not into women? The questions will just, it will flow out of them more than the waterfall at Bard's Leap. Not from personal experience, because, well, my last girlfriend honestly wanted me to have this mod installed even more than I did, I think, which explains a lot, but especially given the main use of this mod being to make NPCs naked, you can see why this may cause some issues and why I've really had to restrain myself when talking about it. And finally, in at number 1, the Serana Dialogue add-on. This number might, in all honesty, be a little too real for me, considering how I've been messing around most of this list. Okay, I've talked about it on my Instagram before, but over the past year or so, I've come to realize that the last relationship I was in was definitely an extremely toxic one. I was being manipulated and gaslit and a whole mess of other things. However, I thought what was going on was normal. Based on what I was seeing on social media and TV and just in my own life, I figured that this kind of behavior was normal and to be expected. However, something that started to clue me in into how messed up things really were was the Serana Dialogue add-on. Yeah, basically, with this mod installed, you'll want to do the Dawnguard DLC first before even the main vanilla quest line, since with this mod, Serana will have an incredible amount of additional dialogue about the main quest line, Dragonborn, and even guild storylines. But it also injects an element of romance into these stories and into the quest lines for those of you who wanted to marry Serana only to find out that she wasn't actually a candidate for it in the vanilla game. This fixes that, even after curing herself of vampirism. This mod eliminates that whole issue, and it makes the connection more than just a you got me a mammoth's tusk because I was lonely, so how about we just get married instead thing, you know, the typical complete a quest, have them fall for you thing, okay? In this case, the dialogue choices matter, there are roleplay opportunities, and as sad as it sounds, it started me on the path of realizing that my situation wasn't healthy. And if you agree that that's sad, just imagine how bad it had to be for this to be what truly ended up ruining my love life. Yeah.
Coming in at number 10, we have attacking a chicken in Riverwood. Yeah, you guessed it. People who have never played Skyrim might be thinking, oh god, how powerful must chickens be in this game that badass warriors with enough strength to kill a dragon will never even pick up a fight with a chicken? Well, it's not the chicken that's really the problem, it's their owners, and everyone who knows the owners. Basically, if you kill a chicken owned by an NPC, it's classed as a crime against them and they will probably attack you. The best example of this is in Riverwood, where there is usually almost no guards, and so if you punch one of their chickens, they will punch you to death. Next up at number 9 now, we have falling off a mountain. There are paths to pretty much every single part of Skyrim. There should never be a need for you to tiptoe around the side of a mountain to get to where you need to. But does that stop you? Nah. Paths are safe, but we all know that dangerously wall hopping along the side of a mountain might be slightly faster sometimes, so we do just that. Just like in real life, you can lose your footing and come crashing down the mountain and die right next to that nice path that you probably should have taken. Alright, coming in at number 8 now, we have mixing up your shouts. So, picture this, you're on a cliff, you're fighting the last bandit of a group who thought they could take you. They were wrong. Now, he's standing there with his back to the edge of the cliff. Instead of hacking him to bits like you normally do, you decide to use your unrelenting force shout and send him plummeting to his death. Except, you didn't have the unrelenting force shout equipped as your shout, you have whirlwind sprint. Yeah. So instead, you go running off the edge of the cliff to your death, leaving behind one very thankful but confused bandit to try and figure out what just happened. Alright guys, moving on to number 7 now, we have eating a jarring root. For most players, their first encounter with a jarring root will be during the Dark Brotherhood questline. You're told that it's one of the most powerful poisons in the world, and eating it can result in instant death. It must only be used against the target. So, what do a lot of Skyrim players do? You guessed it, they eat it. Some people say it was to try and find out its properties for alchemy, but other people just can't resist a challenge, even if it kills them. Alright, coming in at number 6 now, we have drowning. This always seems to make it onto these lists. There really is no excuse to die from drowning in Skyrim. There are plenty of spells and consumables that can help you reach the bottom of those deep lakes or get to those underwater caves. Don't risk holding your breath. And if you're still not happy with having to hold your breath, just make an Argonian character. They can breathe underwater. Simple. I'd like to see you guys try and drown while playing that. I think probably some of you could.
Next up, we've got a creepypasta called Curse of the Sword. This creepypasta tells the tale of a gamer who bought Skyrim on Steam. Now, before he even fully downloaded the game, he was already searching the web for mods, having heard that there were some pretty good ones for the Elder Scrolls series. He stumbled upon a website that he had never visited before that had a mod called Curse of the Sword. There wasn't any pictures or videos, only a text description that read, "Hope there's a toilet under you." He googled the name of the mod, but nothing else came up on any of the Skyrim forums. Curious, he decided to download it, thinking it was some sort of joke. Now, after Skyrim had fully downloaded, he installed the mod immediately, and to his surprise, on the game's main menu, there was an option with the title of the mod, and a distorted image of what appeared to be a man's head split into multiple pieces. He selected it. The loading screen featured an image of a sword with a red glow around it. When the game loaded up, he looked into his inventory to discover a bunch of rare Daedric items. Neat. So he started to explore and eventually found himself near a tomb with a sign outside that read, "Do not enter or die." So naturally he entered. The first thing he noticed was how silent the tomb was. The second thing, after descending for what felt like several minutes, was that on the stone path below him there was a lot of dry blood and skeleton bones. All of a sudden, a piercing noise blasted through his computer's speakers. It lasted for a split second, but it was jarring nonetheless. He looked around. Nothing was nearby his character. He eventually found a room with a chest in it after continuing to explore. Opening it, it contained an item named simply Sword. As soon as he collected it, he was teleported elsewhere to what can only be described as a different dimension. The loading screen read, "Why did you pick up the sword?" Naturally, the player figured it was the cursed sword, the namesake of the mod, and was curious with where this was going. Once the loading screen disappeared, everything was black, with the faintest glow in the distance of a still figure walking towards him. He couldn't describe it, but for whatever reason, terror and dread seeped into him, and he began to uncontrollably shake in real life. As the figure got closer, he could make out its details. It had a deformed face with eyes pulled out of their sockets, a body with hundreds of slashes, bleeding, and in its legs were swords, identical to the cursed sword that he had picked up. Text appeared on the screen that read, "I told you." He was utterly terrified. Before he could move or do anything though, his computer shut off. Tried turning it back on, only to discover that the mod was nowhere to be found, completely wiped off of his computer. And last but not least, our next creepypasta is Dagon the Dark. This creepypasta begins by bringing the wait feature in Skyrim to the reader's attention. Now in Skyrim, compared to earlier Elder Scrolls games, the wait feature allows you to choose between an hour to 24 hours to wait, just to pass time in the game, and a time lapse occurs behind the waiting screen that depicts time going by, from shadows moving rapidly to the sky changing color. Now the author notes that they didn't think people or other living things were rendered during the wait time, but They were wrong. While they were playing one day, they decided to wait from 3 AM in game time to 8 AM in game time in order to wait for a shop to open in Whiterun. Now as he waited, he noticed something strange pass him by. It was a shadowy figure that came up from the ground and fell back within it, all within the duration of about half a second. It made the player jump, but he assumed it must have been a glitch of sorts, or something flying overhead, like a dragon, but it was missing texture and must have been just a black model. Curious, he decided to go to the Bethesda forums and wrote a post about it, but accidentally misspelled dragon, calling it Dagon in his post instead. That led to a joke on the forum about this mysterious shadow being called Dagon the Dark. But despite the comments the player received, no one had any clue as to what it actually was. One guy suggested that if it were a dragon, and it was just missing textures, it would be invisible. But he was curious too, so he said that he would go into the code of the game and see if there was anything for all black dragon textures. After that, the player returned to their game, only to discover that there were no dragons in it at all anymore. Strange. They searched over 6 days in-game for one, and none ever showed up. They even tried summoning one, but nothing happened. So the player started a new game instead. But that's when things got weird. The game didn't begin where it usually did, with the prisoner sequence and the Unbound quest. Instead, it began in Whiterun at Dragon's Reach. After a bit of exploring, the player realized that the Jarl was nowhere to be found, which made things even creepier when they started to hear the Jarl's voice say aloud, "You have to slay the beast." Assuming that the beast was the dragon from the Dragon Rising quest, the player continued on their way outside of Dragon's Reach, only to discover that all of the guards and the NPCs out there were also repeating the same phrase, "You have to slay the beast." After checking out the tower where you fight the dragon in that mission, the player was surprised to find no dragon. Only more guards who said the exact same phrase. That's when it happened. Dagon the Dark, an entirely black dragon without wings that matched the shadow that the player saw while waiting, just appeared. It slaughtered all of the guards nearby, with them screaming louder than the player had ever heard them do before in the game. Its eyes were pitch black, and when it faced the player, it opened up its big black mouth. Next thing the player knew, their character was swallowed whole. Their screen went white. They looked around, and finally, they directed their vision to their feet. There, staring back at them, was Dagon's model. The player couldn't look away, and after what felt like an eternity, they woke up on the floor of their room, their computer turned off. The player went onto the forum and their post to discover that that one guy who said he would look into the code had responded to him. Now this guy couldn't find anything in the game, but asked for the player to send over a copy of their game directory so he could patch his own game with the player's buggy files. Now it turns out that there was something there, but while they were chatting and this guy was in the middle of investigating it, his messages to the player just randomly halted, as if something had happened to him, and the player never heard from him again. Alright, there we have it friends, a handful of Skyrim creepypastas. Now for the full versions, be sure to give the titles of each of these a Google. They're great reads and worth checking out on your own time.
In a 10 alternate start Live Another Life. Skyrim is one of those games that I go back to all the time. I've played through the game I don't know how many different times, and every time I do, of course, I end up being a stealth archer. However, they all start differently, and the typical get caught in a dragon attack in Helgen thing gets old. In fact, it gets old after the first time, really. And that might stop some people from playing it over and over again, but not anymore. With the alternate start Live Another Life mod, well, I mean, I'm sure anyone who actually knows Skyrim modding knows about this mod, and I feel like the title is fairly evident. Basically, you can become anyone using this mod. You can choose from like 20 different starting options that each have their own options, and they give you a slight backstory as well as a new starting location that isn't Helgen. But before that, like, you don't even need to be the Dragonborn too. But once you're ready to become the Dragonborn, you can make your way to Helgen and start the main story as normal. This caused me to play through the game so many times that I actually ended up bailing on a girlfriend in the past because I would have rather been playing Skyrim. Grade 10 was weird, guys. Okay, it's a long story. In at 9, Relationship Dialogue Overhaul. The Relationship Dialogue Overhaul is exactly what it sounds like. It unlocks various lines of dialogue previously cut from the game for whatever reason and actually re-enables them. According to the mod page, this quote adds over 5,000 lines of completely voiced dialogue for NPCs using the original voices. Friends, followers, spouses, rivals, and others have much more to say. All default voices now have follower dialogue, and it also fixes dialogue bugs and restores cut dialogue that has never been heard before. Based on the relationship the NPC has with the player that works with the existing dialogue from the game. Yeah, you get more bang for your buck. Finally. Considering how I've bought the game 4 times, I feel like I deserve it. All the lines are voiced using the original voices from the game and consist of existing lines that have been added in new and suitable situations, as well as completely new dialogue that was created by editing multiple lines together to form brand new ones. Some of which sound like they were recorded, but a few of them you can tell were a little spliced. Friends talk to you more like friends, followers have much more more to say when you're talking to them, and if your spouse is a follower, they will actually talk to you like a spouse instead of a follower. So basically this just makes your spouse more like your spouse in game. I have to say in game. And well, like, you know, they won't repeat the same 8 things over and over again. So yeah, more variety in game means more trouble outside. And by outside I mean in the apartment, because we don't go outside. In at 8, Immersive Armory. Immersive Armory, like Alternate Start, adds so much to Skyrim that it feels like a whole DLC. What I call the Immersive Armory though is really just the immersive weapons and immersive armor mods that I think were at least at one point separate, but as of Special Edition they might be packaged together. Although given that some people may want one over the other, I don't know if they are still like together or if they're separate. I don't know how it's going normally, but no matter the actual technicalities, the immersive armor and the immersive weapons mod add enough to your game to keep it feeling like vanilla Skyrim, but giving it that extra bit of oomph. The armors are cool, and with the variations on the armor itself in the mod, you can customize certain aspects to make your character truly unique. But this also adds another element of exploration, and for those completionists who want to collect everything they can, you're gonna be in for one hell of a ride. With hundreds of new items added to the game, you're gonna be working with like that smithing tree for a long time to be able to get complete access. I could have included like the Legacy of the Dragonborn mod, the mod that adds like the Dragonborn Museum in Solitude that you can fill out, but I feel like this one's more accessible to everyone, even though it's 2 mods, or I guess now technically 3. In at 7, Skyrim Family Life. In Skyrim, you for some reason can't have an actual family. Okay, well obviously it's due to engine limitations, but you can't actually like have your own children. It's an interesting idea that many players wanted access to, because you can only actually adopt kids after the Hearthfire mod. But the Skyrim Family Life mod actually enables you to have biological kids with your Skyrim spouse. I don't exactly know how it works, but I mean, if you have a family in Skyrim, okay, what's the need to have one in real life, right? I mean, that's definitely going to make some people mad that I said that, but come on, okay? You have to understand how being able to have a biological kid with your video game wife is probably gonna cause some problems with your partner, or your video game wife or husband or whatever. I mean, but let's be honest, everyone who plays Skyrim probably plays as a female character, and they probably end up marrying women because men are trash. But considering that this mod, or at least a mod similar to this one, is compatible with certain Lover's Lab mods, and if you don't know what Lover's Lab is, then you probably don't need to be worrying about it anyway. Yeah, at least one version of the having biological kids mod genre, I guess, is a little more realistic than the typical black screen and a small block of text, or even just like sleeping in the bed next to your spouse, enabling the possibility of implied frisky time. So yeah, it's on this list for a reason. In at 6, Summer Mist Enchantments. Summer Mist Enchantments is another one of those mods that isn't gonna ruin your love life because of its content, but rather how much time you'll be spending playing the game because of it. Summer Mist Enchants is the special edition version of the Winter Mist Enchants mod, so if you see that one, they're basically one and the same. This mod adds things like shout cooldown enchantments to armor, experience boosting enchantments, and much more. From what I remember off the top of my head, there was one for making the ground shake when you landed, one for summoning a spectral warrior when you took damage, and one that generates random amounts of gold every day, but once you take off that piece, that amount of money disappears. So finding all those enchantments and then trying to find the best combo for your character is definitely going to kill your love life, just because you won't have time for anything else. Halfway through into number 5, Touring Carriages. For those who want to stay away from fast travel, Touring Carriages is an incredible mod, turning what would normally be a loading screen into an actual journey where you can get out for a moment to discover nearby locations, ask about the region that you're currently in or going to, or where you can just fall asleep and be woken up when you get there, which is essentially the vanilla version of fast traveling carriages. Combined with the VR Fix mod on the Nexus, Touring Carriages is great for roleplay and immersion. It's especially useful if you're using some form of VR treadmill like the Catwalk C2, since at that point you're legally required to prevent fast traveling, at least in my eyes, because if you're lucky enough to use an omnidirectional treadmill, or I guess technically slide mill for VR, you can't fast travel, okay? wrong. You have to experience Skyrim properly, okay? I want one of those. I think it would be like such an incredible experience for single player adventure games, but they're very expensive. I'm working on it though, okay? And when I do get one, I am absolutely keeping touring carriages because it's such an immersive way to make long journeys and I won't actually have to walk it. And it works with the carriages at the Hearthfire homes as well. In it for Realm of Lorkhan. Alternate Start Live Another Life is an essential Skyrim mod. Okay, it's one of the most influential and inspiring mods out there, enabling you to not have to be the Dragonborn, either until you're ready or maybe even not at all. However, the normal version of the mod for Skyrim Special Edition does not work in VR. You won't even be able to load up the game. So Realm of Lorkhan is a very good second choice. The mod is a visually stunning alternate start mod that lets you customize your character even more than alternate start, being able to give you curses or blessings before even loading in, and being able to start with more than just base spells or gear, assuming that you can find them in the realm before you drop into Nirn. You'll be set and ready for action with any backstory that you choose. I'm using it right now for a special video on my personal channel where I explore my current load order for Skyrim VR with some role playing thrown in here and there, but this thing is visually stunning, okay, and it provides far more options and combos than Alternate Start. Alternate Start is the OG though, I still love it, but for VR, Realm of Lorkhan. Getting close to the end, and in number 3, Open Cities. Open Cities Skyrim is my all-time favorite Skyrim mod ever. Hands down, no competition. If you ask me what my favorite Skyrim mod is, this, Open Cities, because this mod removes load doors for major cities and makes them a part of the main world space. No longer do you need to load into Whiterun. Instead, you can just walk right in the gate. Or you can even jump over the walls if you're feeling a little stealthier. And considering how this is a VR version of the game, possibly the most immersive version that we ever can get, load doors kind of ruin that for me, okay? This mod is a bit computer intensive, which is why the cities are separate cells originally, but in my opinion, it's so worth it. There are patches for the Civil War and for other mods like Atlas map markers, since those can cause issues, and the Legacy of the Dragonborn mod also requires a patch to put the gallery in the New Solitude world space, but there are also secret doors into the city cells in each city, okay? Currently, I found the ones for Riften and Solitude, but it's still, like, it's such a good mod despite those conflicts. Notice board would also need a patch if you use that mod because I know it's popular, but trust me, if your computer can handle it, which it should, I mean my crap top could handle it, you should try it and you will never be able to live without it. And in VR it is so much better. Although there is one issue, it's no longer on the Nexus. Yeah, if you want this mod, you'll have to have it already downloaded for Special Edition, or find another link, which is incredibly unfortunate. But if you have it for Special Edition already, you're good, and if you can find another link, you'll be fine. Since Skyrim VR does work off the same engine as Special Edition, meaning that all Special Edition mods for the most part are compatible. And later I'm going to try adding some of the Creation Club content added in the Anniversary Edition, although I don't know about the compatibility on that. That's why I have to try it. But ultimately, in at number 2, Virik. Virik, also known as VRIK, is a simple mod, but an essential one for anyone playing Skyrim VR. Virik, in its simplest terms, gives your player an actual body, so you're no longer just floating hands. This enables you to actually see the armor that you're wearing, giving you a reason to actually collect cool armors, which, let's be honest, is a solid third of the game's enjoyment. But it also just doesn't add your body. It gives you like weapon slots on that body, allowing you to have quick access to various weapons if you set them up properly. You can have your bow on your back and actually grab it over your shoulder. You can have your mace on your left hip, a torch on your right, and a dagger on your chest. You can even have daggers on your forearms or upper arms for easy access, you know? Oh, it's so good. And then you can switch between these as much as you want, as quickly as you physically can. Basically, it's like the hotkeys setup for favorites that the PC users have, but on your body. I also highly encourage the use of Dragonborn Unlimited, which is a voice recognition mod that allows you to equip spells and shouts by actually saying them, working for both Special Edition and VR, but VR is a little, you gotta get a separate thing for VR. But it's particularly useful in VR if you use magic frequently. My current character uses bound bows as main weapon, so being able to say it at a moment's notice when I need it is actually amazing. And by saying the shout words, I can actually equip them. So if I say Foos, it will equip Unrelenting Force. You're supposed to be able to like use the shouts by saying them, but that just crashes VR users currently. I don't know if they're working on that, but either way, both of these mods in tandem are amazing. Speaking of which, finally, in at number 1, Higgs and Plank. Speaking of amazing mods, okay, Virik is a must must-have for Skyrim VR, and it's also required for this mod, but these two mods are literally what Skyrim VR was missing. Originally, in VR, you felt like a ghost. At first, you were just two floating hands, but even after getting a body with VRIC, you couldn't interact with things. You could move objects, but it would be through like levitating them or by pushing them with a shield. Not anymore. Higgs, or hand interaction gravity gloves for Skyrim, is exactly what this game needed. Well, what it should have originally come with, but we know that Bethesda knew that the modding community would fix whatever issues they had with a simple VR port, okay? But like with Higgs, you can pick up items with your actual hands, you can push signs, you can move things with your weapon, but the focus being that you can use your hands to hold things. I cannot tell you how good this mod feels. Combining it with plank or physical animation and character kinetics, you can actually interact with NPCs with your hands as well, and they respond to your hits in a way that makes sense. You can finally grip two-handed weapons with both of your hands, and well, I'm sure you can think of other uses for being able to grab NPCs' limbs, but honestly though, this mod is good, even if you're not thinking about that. Being able to move bodies by actually dragging them makes the game so much better and improves the Dark Brotherhood questline significantly, and basically it makes the combat and gameplay as close to Blade and Sorcery as I can see it getting, at least for now, because the Skyrim modding community is always proving that it can be bigger and better than it was. Now all I need is like a throat-slitting VR mod and then Skyrim Together VR and I'll be set for life, you'll never see me again.
Starting us off, we have Beta Disc. This story begins with our narrator's uncle Jerry passing away. After his death, he was cleaning out Jerry's old house and discovered some interesting objects in his attic. Now Jerry had worked previously for Bethesda as a PR guy for the last 8 years of his life, and this box was marked with the company's name on it. Our narrator looked in, curious, and found an unmarked disc inside of it, with a note that had been crudely written that said, "Jerry, this thing has got to be destroyed. Make sure nobody finds out about this Skyrim beta. The controversy could ruin us. Signed, TH." Who could that be? Curious, our narrator, filled with questions, decided to pocket the disc, and when he got home, popped it into his PC. He decided that it would be cool to journal his experience with the beta and see what this note was all about. On day 1, our narrator wrote that the game ran pretty smoothly at first. It also lacked the long prisoner introduction sequence. Instead, you were just dropped into the game, starting with the character creation screen. Something was slightly off about the models though. He couldn't help but notice that their eyes seemed different than what he remembered from the released Skyrim game. He chose to play as an Argonian, his favorite, and began the game. At this point, Helgen had already been devastated by a dragon attack, and bodies were littered everywhere. As he explored, he noticed the corpse of Ulfric Stormcloak, the rebel leader in Skyrim that you don't encounter until much later in the title. He also spotted General Tullius, the Imperial leader in Skyrim. Strange. This meant that the plot of the game must have been very different than the one released. On the second day, he continued to explore Helgen, scavenging for whatever useful items he could find. He noticed that the mountains in the distance looked fairly unrendered, and that all of the wildlife he encountered was violent, even peaceful creatures like deer. He raided a few mines, all of which lacked bandits, and felt very strange. On the third day, he went to Riverwood. Even from a distance, he could tell that something was off, and swore that he heard some sort of laughter faintly on the wind. Riverwood had been completely destroyed. Had a dragon attacked here too? All of the NPCs were dead. That's when he noticed something else odd. A figure in the distance with an axe in his hand. Now when he approached this NPC, they started to ramble, saying, "Took it all away from me, killed my wife and my boy, but you won't get me." Then, as if the NPC noticed that he was standing there, started to shout, "Never should have come here." They lunged at his character, swinging wildly. That's when the player realized that it was Hod, the deranged lumberjack. They attacked Hod back in self-defense, killing him. After, they explored the cellar that Hod was standing in front of. Inside was a note that read, "Mad Hunt, Deadroth, Blood Moon, Collapsed Kingdoms, Nirn Forsaken and Fallen, Blackreach, Daedra, Daedra, Daedra." What did it mean? What was going on? Well, he turned off the game. His journal then resumed on day 7, when the player finally made his way to Blackreach. Now the closer he got to Blackreach, the more he heard the same eerie laughter. On the way, he saw giants on roads, all impaled on massive stakes. It filled him with dread. Whoever took out those giants must be strong, and he'd need to level up his character immensely in order to fight them. By day 13, after spending a few days leveling up, he finally went into Blackreach, or at least tried. He noted that there were a lot of Falmer lurking around, and that the city looked as if it was in the process of being reconstructed. That's when he noticed that the city was full of Daedra, and it seemed as if they had the Falmer under their control. The next and final entry was on day 18. The player noted that Blackreach's reconstruction was almost complete, and that the Falmer had gathered towards the center of the city, doing something that appeared like praying. Approaching the city gates, he found them to be locked, so he went to a nearby house and went to sleep in a bed, hoping a few in-game hours passing may fix that problem. But when he woke up, the game was totally different. He couldn't move the game's camera. The room was pitch black with only part of the floor visible. Finally, something appeared. It was Sheogorath, the Daedric prince. He started started to speak to the player, asking what he was doing here. It wasn't long before the player realized that this must be a game in which the Daedra won in Oblivion, the previous Elder Scrolls major title. The prince then attacked him, the screen went red, and the loading screen appeared. After the game loaded, the player found himself in a clearing in the woods. His character's right arm had been ripped off. It was gruesome, and the player almost felt sick at the sight of it. Around him, creatures started to emerge from the woods. They were NPCs, half human, half animal, all crying out in agony. They closed in on his character, but before anything could happen, the player turned off the game and never resumed it again.
Coming in at number 5 now, we have accidentally shouting. Dragon shouts are a powerful tool for the Dragonborn to use. They can help swing the odds in your favor against some pretty powerful enemies. Because of that, most players have the button for it at close hand, ready to use, but it can be a little bit too close. Sometimes you'll be talking to a merchant, a guard, or even the Jarl of a town, and when you go to open up your magic page, you accidentally use your dragon shout on the person you were talking to. Oh dear. I did this a lot when I first got the ice form shout. I'd be having a lovely chat with a trader, I'd accidentally freeze him in a block of solid ice, and then I die to the angry villagers around me. Good times. At the number 4 spot now, we have stealing in plain sight of a guard. This has got to be one of the dumbest ways to annoy a guard in Skyrim. The game has a pretty handy stealth indicator with a closed eye if you can't be seen at that time, and an open eye if you are visible. Don't steal stuff when guards are nearby if that eye is open. It's that simple. Now, depending on what you're stealing or your existing bounty level, you may barely have time to even stand up from stealthing before you eat a nice slice of cold steel. Yum. At number 3 now, we have flammable gas. In some mines around the game, you can find flammable gas. It's usually pouring out of broken lamps. You know it's there because it leaves a sort of shimmer in the air in front of you.
This visual effect is really weird.
Now, most players have to learn this the hard way though, by blowing themselves up. You see, the gas can be ignited by any fire. A torch you're carrying could just blow the whole thing up. Even simply having a flame spell ready in your hands could send you to a fiery death. Ha! Rest in peace, Dragonborn. Died to your own flame spell. Coming out at number 2 now, we have dying to a mammoth. Look at these things. Big, majestic creatures that roam the plains of Skyrim. They're nice, peaceful herbivores that just want to be left alone, but if you don't grant them that one wish, they will straight up kill you. Like I said, they're big creatures that can roam on flat plains. You can see these things from a mile away. If you somehow end up in one of their faces, your face will make friends with the ground soon after. And finally at number 1 now, we have dying because of your companion. I can't even begin to tell you guys how many times I've been trying to sneak past a bandit camp only to have my companion just charge in there, aggro all of them, and get us both killed. I also hate it when I'm trying to run away from some enemies in a tight cave and I can't get out because, oh yeah, my companion is blocking me as I get hacked to death. Maybe this isn't dumb because of us or even because of our companions. Maybe at the end of the day, Skyrim's a little bit dumb too.